our panelist time. This is the National Association of Black Counselors monthly discussion group. This month we are talking about hotels, conversations that Black mothers do not have with their Black daughters about sex, sexuality, and mental health. Our moderator for this discussion is the phenomenal, the outrageous, the most highly esteemed and regarded Dr. David Julius Ford. I'm not going to tell you all about him. You can Google him, right? We got Google now. But I'm going to turn it over to him and allow him to introduce our panelists.
Don't believe that shit he just said. Thank you, Dr. Nick. I really appreciate that. I'm so blessed to be amongst such greatness, such Blackness today. My Sunday has been Black as fuck already, and it's going to continue to be Black as fuck. And so I really appreciate being a part of this discussion and being able to moderate it. You know, because I love being fed by Black women, and there are some great Black women on this call today. My name is Dr. David Julius Ford Jr. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm calling in from the beautiful Jersey Shore. I am an assistant professor at Monmouth University, hopefully going up for an associate next year for tenure. So we'll see how that goes. So blessed to be a part of this, but I don't want to take up too much time. I want to introduce our panelists, our esteemed panelists. We have Dr. Lex, we have Ashley, Fennell, and Dee. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves in their own right, and then we'll get into it. I have some questions for them, but Dr. Nick is going to be monitoring the chat box for questions that you all may have. We really want this to be interactive, and so that, you know, I know that you all have questions that you want to ask the panelists as well. And then as they talk, that's going to generate more questions from you all. So please, you know, chime in. Let us know your reactions to what we're talking about. If you have anything to add, you know, we're all a part of this. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from you all as well. So without further ado, Dr. Lex, tell us about yourself.
Hi, y'all. So I'm Dr. Lex. My pronouns are she, her, and doctor. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I think about people in systems versus individuals. And I have a lot of other letters behind my name that say I talk about sex. I feel quite comfortable talking about sex. I teach about sex and sexuality. I am someone who identifies as Black. I'm also fat. I'm a Southerner. I'm pansexual, and I am a recovering Baptist. I live in Philadelphia, PA right now, but I am a Georgia peach from Atlanta, specifically inside 285. So I'm from the actual city of Atlanta, not the outskirts. And I run a private practice, so the Institute for Sexuality and Intimacy, where I see mostly Black couples, queer folks. I also identify as pansexual, and I really love Black love, and I help lovers build, create, maintain, and perpetuate intimacy within their relationships. And then I also teach kids about being shame-free with sex education.
Thank you, Dr. Lex. Yes, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. We queer folks love to see folks that practice and deal with us. Thank you. Ashley.
I thought I was gonna go last. Hey, hello everybody. How's everyone doing on this Sunday afternoon? So I am new to the field. I'm the person on the panel that is giving the new perspective of things because I'm just getting out of my learning phase. I'm currently at Wake Forest University, and I will be graduating in August with my master's in clinical mental health. Next week, I will be done with my year of clinical internship. So I've been seeing clients now for a year. I tend to stick with the couples population and individuals dealing with racial trauma, depression, anxiety, sexual issues. I do prefer couples though. I love working with couples. The populations that I would like to stick with going forward are African American, military, and LGBTQ. These are three populations that are near and dear to my heart. I am married, I am a military spouse, and I have 4 children, all under the age of 13. So I'm out here just doing a lot and trying to get myself to where Dr. Lex is, having all those letters. My ultimate goal is to get into sex therapy and work specifically with couples in those different populations that I mentioned. I am an advocate for the whole self, working on the whole self. We do have parts, but we have to be whole, and wellness is a big thing. I work from the wellness model. The medical model is not something that I ascribe to, because we don't need to just focus on problems all the time. Sometimes we need to focus on strengths. So that is the perspective I like to come from. I'm so happy to be here and that Dr. Nick invited me to this panel, because this is such a topic that's in my lane. I am all about sex, learning to not think that it's taboo. We can talk about it openly and it should not be a problem. So I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you all so much.
And you must be great because you're at my alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Wake Forest is your alma mater.
Yeah, I'm a double deacon. I did my undergrad and master's in counseling at Wake Forest.
Oh,
yes,
okay. Right.
yes. And so go Deeks. I'm from Winston-Salem, so yeah.
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm actually from Western New York. I'm from Niagara Falls, New York, and I'm currently in Denver, Colorado. This is where the military has us right now.
Awesome. And last but not least, D.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deandrea Blaylock-Johnson. I am born and raised in St. Louis. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist, where I own Sankofa Sex Therapy. I work with individuals and those in all types of relationships. So couples, those who may be polyamorous or have other forms of ethical non-monogamous relationships. And I also primarily work with Black folks. That's my heart. The name of my organization is Sankofa on purpose. We're going to look back and get what's useful and bring it back, looking forward to the future. Amen and Ashe. I also have a theological background. I minored in theology in undergrad at St. Louis University, and I've also taken some graduate level seminary courses so that I can help my clients to kind of decipher some bad theology that they learned growing up, where they can then create their own sexual ethic that makes sense for them. There are a lot of resources for people who have had negative experiences with the church and kind of shun their faith completely, which is fine. That's their journey, but not a lot for specifically Black folks who still want to have a connection to Christianity, but still kind of really understand a way to understand, does this guy still love me for who I am as a full person? So I help folks figure that out in the counseling session. So that's who I am. I am Blackity Black, and I am recently engaged, getting married this November, and no babies, but I other mother in so many other ways. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
See, I told you all, we are living high on the hog, as we say in the South. Day, All right, so the first question I have for my panelists is, kind of talk to me about your practices, your clientele. Talk to me about some of the major concerns that your clients bring to you, and then some of your interventions and how you help to decolonize our profession.
So I can kick that off very simply. People usually come to me as maybe a second stop, usually in couplehood. They maybe gone to church counseling and it didn't work out, or they had another counselor and nobody gave them permission to talk about sex at all. So all of my clients, including the kids, we always have a sexual health interview in our second session. So I ask about pleasure, I ask about trauma, I ask about where they want to go, I ask about their fantasies and what comes up for them, and then how we're actually putting those things into practice that help their bodies feel good. From womb to tomb, sexuality is present, and it's not something that people get robbed of or lose innocence by enacting. I also talk about trauma. So because I exist in the couples world and the lovers world, I don't even say that mostly, lovers and lovership, usually it's decreasing conflict. So helping people connect and increase arousal, begetting arousal. Decentering the penis, if there is a penis involved, from pleasure. So just because a penis is hard or soft, it does not end or begin sexual pleasure. And most people don't understand that or never have gotten that. And then a lot of it is really helping people get over sexual shame. So that is actually the next thing I'm teaching on, is the Black Girl's Guide to Getting Rid of Sexual Shame. So starting to dismantle some of these ideas that are put on Black bodies, and specifically Black femme bodies, around being sexual and then what it means to actually indulge in pleasure. And so I get a lot to dismantle some of those notions and to really challenge, what are you using here that serves you? If it don't serve you, why are we keeping it? What's the purpose? Right? And it's really that part of my work, along with that systems perspective of nobody's in a vacuum. There are so many people and resources, and I told Dr. Ford earlier, I'm the coolest nerd you're ever going to meet. So my background is in physics, pre-med, so I do hold a degree in physics. It is not useful for therapy outside of colorful metaphors. So I tend to see everybody as their own solar system. And my job is to figure out when you're shining the brightest and who you shine brightest the next to, who you need to be in community with. And those are some of my interventions, as well as giving people just education. This is your vulva. We can say a vulva out loud. And that's, well, this is my vulva puppet. This is Raha, right? So we can talk about the lips and the pleasure. We can talk about the clitoris and the hood. We can talk about how to clean around that bad boy so you don't get smegma, right? So we can talk about all of those things as well in my office. It's a reprieve for really Black women to go to pieces. And it's okay that they go to pieces, because you'll be able to function tomorrow, I promise. So that's the honor of my work. I get to hold those pieces for a little while.
Love it. I love it. We're going to talk about that shame in a little bit, but to hold that right there, I love it. You're setting me up for a good discussion. Thank you, Dr. Lex. Ashley.
Okay, so I am currently at a group private practice. Like I said, I will be completing my clinical internship next week. But over the past year, I have worked with very diverse populations. Living in Colorado, it's a lot of white folks. So I've been working with a lot of white people, individual and couples counseling. But because I am in Colorado, the Black people here specifically look for Black therapists, and we are very hard to find. So I did get a lot of Black clients as well. And what I'm noticing here, especially with all my clients, is just, and I think it could be attributed to the pandemic as well, a lot of people are showing up with depression, anxiety that they don't really know what to do with. So a lot of my practice is kind of teaching coping mechanisms and skills, and working on the strengths that you already have, or those things that you view as weaknesses and vulnerabilities that are actually strengths. I'm a big advocate of anxiety being a teacher and not being a detriment. So that's kind of with individuals, that's what I see. Now, oddly enough, all of my clients outside of couples are women. And I feel like that is because in my profile on our website, I specifically put that I like to work in womanist theory, which is a spinoff from feminist theory, but it takes into account our intersectionality as women of color. So I think that kind of scared men away. I have not had one male client in a whole year other than my couples. So working from that perspective, though, for me, is because I was very adamant, and being that I'm in school, I think it was more prevalent, learning the foundations of counseling and learning that this was created for white middle-class men, and that these theories are not meant to cater to Black women, Black men, people of color, period. I was very adamant about finding interventions and theories that were specific to that population. So of course I looked into feminist therapy, and I'm like, okay, let's try to dig a little deeper, because I don't think that's for us. So for me, the deconstruction part of this field is very important. When I found womanist theory, I was like, that's the one, because I can't separate my Blackness from my womanhood. So that's the one. And I find that in working with women across the board, One of the main things I like to work with is assertiveness training, because women just have this, even Black women, you wouldn't think it, but they are not as outspoken as the world may have you think, because we grow up a lot of times in the church where we are, or as children, we're told, be seen and not heard, don't speak unless spoken to, don't speak up for yourself, it's disrespectful to have an opinion. We're told all these things that kind of shame us and take our voice away. So what I found with a lot of women is that they need assertiveness training. They need to learn that being assertive is not the same as being aggressive, and that does not make you angry, because there's this fear, especially with Black women, that I don't want to be the angry Black woman. And my question to every client is, well, what's wrong with being angry? That's an emotion. That's something that we feel. So that's okay. So I work a lot in that. When it comes to couples, I find that communication is the main issue. You have people who grew up differently, who handle conflict differently, who saw conflict handled differently, so they struggle to communicate with one another. So with couples, it's communication about everything from sex to finances to child rearing, just all these different avenues where couples can't seem to connect because they're not understanding we have a different lens, and that is okay. We don't have to agree, we don't have to have the same lens, but we have to find a place of compromise and a middle ground. So with my couples, that's what I tend to work on a lot. I'm very much all about looking at couples from the whole couple. Like, what's your sex life like? How is intimacy? That is one of my first questions, because I find a lot of times if that area is shaky, then we are gonna have problems in every other area, not only just communication, but all the areas. So that's what I do with couples, but being new in it, I am still getting my feet in, and it's been a wonderful experience, but I'm very adamant about sticking with the populations of Black, LGBTQ, military, and that is where I would like to focus. And then working with them, it's all about deconstructing what they done taught me at this school, because it's not gonna work for my people.
Oh Lord, that was beautiful, and you also talked about the shame too. So I love it. I love the work that you're doing, and the fact that you're there in an area where you're needed, because there aren't that many of you there. So awesome, Ashley. Thank you. Indeed.
Yes. So I just want to say what an honor it is to be doing this work alongside these amazing professionals, just to listen to your perspectives and what you're bringing. A lot of people seek me out specifically because I'm a sex therapist. And so they'll come in, but sex is just the tip of the iceberg. Often what's beneath that is relationship. It could be identity. It could be religious things and whatnot. And so, like I said, with my background with theology, I hold space for people to kind of ask those tough questions, to dismantle some negative things that they may have been taught in their upbringing, so that they can then live as whole persons in Christ if they identify as Christian. And so, although I do provide therapy from a Christian perspective, that's not across the board. I'm not just a Christian sex therapist, but I'm a sex therapist who's a Christian who can provide that. So I just make sure that I'm providing appropriate services as they're requested. And like I said, I work with individuals and those in all types of relationships. I have a lot of people who have various forms of ethically non-monogamous relationships, and they may come to me not necessarily because they're having problems with that, but thinking about ways to maybe better communicate with their partners, to figure out what boundaries look like. And also with the individuals, I work with some people who may identify as queer, but also as Christian, and want a therapist who can hold space for those various identities. And so that's who I am and what I do. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yes. So I kind of want to dive right into the whole, shame piece. And we all know that a lot of times shame is one of those things that is placed upon young Black women, whether it comes from the teachings from their mothers, their grandmothers, their fathers, the church. So kind of talk to us about this concept of shame for developing quicker than other people, shame for noticing that your body is sexual, shame for noticing what your body is, shame for being sexual, shame for what you like to wear. So talk about this concept of shame and how you have seen it, addressed it, called it out, challenged it.
I remember being on a panel a couple of years ago, and one of the persons there mentioned how she was taught that the size of the woman's ass determined how many men followed her. And she used it as this, I know that was my face, and my best friend was at the audience, and she texted me, "Fix your face," but also I understand, because I was like, girl, what are you talking about? But just this idea that because your body is shaped a certain way, then it's a perceived promiscuity or whatnot. And I hate that word too, but these perceptions just based on how you're shaped. And she stood on that and was proud of this proud of this thought. So yeah.
And you know, and so to me about that, like that picture's going around of the Black teacher that was very curvaceous, and they were like, is this appropriate to wear the teacher? Who the fuck determines what's appropriate? You know?
Word. So I have a lot of followers. I'm very proud of my butt. My butt is very nice.
Hello.
Very nice. I've seen it. It's very nice.
That being said, thank you, friend. I just want to be clear. So when we say sexual shame, right, and the Brene Brown definition of, so guilt is, oh no, you feel bad. Shame is, I am bad, right? And so Black women specifically, since the time they were discovered by kidnappers on the coast of Africa, right? So kidnappers stood on a boat and saw some bare-breasted Black women and were aroused. And because they saw some bare-breasted Black women, specifically African women, then they said, oh, they must want the D. They want dick because their breasts are out and I'm sexually aroused. So that means that they want it. And that is the mindset that has been perpetuated since those kidnappers started kidnapping, right? So on slave ships, right, where sexual assaults and atrocities would happen because they wanted it, because they were walking around of what was comfortable for them in their climate and normal in their culture. We still see that today. Because she's walking around in short shorts or tight clothes or no bra or no panties, she must want this. And we have blamed women and girls, specifically girls. Well, what did you do to make him do that to you? Well, you're acting fast. What did you think was going to happen? Everybody know Uncle Joe don't need to go off with no kids, and you don't need to sit on Uncle Joe's lap. But we not excommunicating Uncle Joe from the family. Right? So that trauma that comes up that has been perpetuated from these ideas instills that shame. But maybe if I shame her, I will keep her safe. Maybe if she feels that this is wrong, she will be safe. And it's a mechanism that's been employed and deployed that doesn't work. Then we just have women that are settling for less. Girls who are seeking out comfort in others because they've been taught that they're bad because of these natural feelings and that they don't necessarily have access to them. And then they end up in our offices, or they end up really hurt, or they end up not taking care of themselves, or they end up dead. Honest to God, they end up dead. From disease,
and that death is physical and emotional.
Yes, right? Well, I don't need that. And you've seen people who are like, well, I don't even need sex. I don't need sexual pleasure. I have no sexual pleasure. Could be the most pious person and have cut off an entire part of themselves because of the harm and the trauma that they carry. Whether that was physical, mental, emotional abuse, whether that was, because y'all remember, we're society. People make up society. So we'd be like, oh, well, society has taught us. That's us. That's each and every one of us in this room, in our families, in our schools, in our classroom, at work. We are society. So that shame is really, I am bad and I don't deserve love for it. So I just want to be really clear when we're talking about shame, that's how it manifests. If I don't deserve love because of this sexuality piece.
Ooh, you just mind fucked me, child.
I wore a condom though, and I added lube.
Okay, so taking from what Dr. Lex actually just said, that whole going back to the shores of Africa and kidnappers and colonization, once we get here and we're talking about today, the church has continued to perpetuate the shame, because what we were taught once we got here, we had to change everything we believed. Our people had to change everything they believed. So now the church adds the additional layer of not only are you bad, and so now you're thinking I am bad, and that's shame, but you will never be good enough for God if you don't fit in this box. And that is fear to some people, to know that nothing I do will ever be good enough. So now I'm bad and I'm not good enough. So that just continues to add shame and the layer of shame. And we try to counteract that by saying, well, this is to protect you, because of the very things she mentioned about them seeing us on the shores and getting aroused. So you can't arouse anybody. So let's cover up. Let's be modest. Let's take this purity challenge. Let's do all these things that take you out of who you are and tell you that who you naturally are, the sexual urges you naturally have, are all bad because they can lead to you being harmed. So I have to protect you. So we feel like, okay, if I don't live my life a certain way, or if I don't cover my sexuality, I am open to harm. And we don't recognize that the very things that we are being taught are harmful to us as well. The very things the church tells us, you have to cover up, you have to do this. It is your job to help men control themselves. You have to dress a certain way because they can't control themselves, and that is on you that they can't control themselves. So now not only am I bad and not good enough, but everything is my fault. If that man can't control himself, that is my fault. So that just keeps the cycle of shame there, because, ooh, I wore this and my ankles were out, so this is my fault. So now I'm ashamed because of that. Now I feel bad because of that. So the church took everything that happened to us once we were brought here, and they just made it exponentially worse by taking away our personhood and taking away our womanhood and saying, you're sexual beings, but only in the right context, only once you're married. And if you have been told all this time to be ashamed of that part of yourself, you can't just drop that soon as you get married. When you get married, now you're gonna be all screwed up, and then you're gonna be sitting in our office trying to figure out, well, how do I tell my husband I'm not happy? How do I talk about sex with my husband? Because my mom and no one ever talked to me about it because it was a taboo and shameful thing. So we're taking something natural and now we have made it shameful. And now everybody's confused. Like, what do you do from that point? And it's just, the cycle continues and nobody seems to know how to stop it.
And I just want to add to Ashley's piece real quick, Dee, before, because you about to spit hot fire. The other part of that is, right, we've also been pitting that against other women. I have to be more pure than this other woman to be chosen, right? And we do that because of rape culture. We have to do that because I can't be as drunk. I can't be the drunkest woman at the party because then I'm dangerous, but I have to be less drunk than her. Mm-hmm. And so losing some of that sister's keeper stuff, right? And then the fact that other women are like, let me shame her so she learns this lesson early and now to protect her. Because it comes from our grandmothers, TTs, cousins, mothers of churches as well. And absolutely with that part of looking at that redeeming of how do I become good enough, then becomes a part. And then not all people feel that natural inclination of sexuality, right? There are asexual people that exist. And then they're looked at as being wrong. Well, something must have happened to you. What's wrong with you? Right? And they're demonized. And well, like, how come you don't feel these feelings? You know, you're getting old. You need to start getting married. You need to start, you know, having babies. And it's like, well, you're not.
That social clock is ticking.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So just like adding on those caveats, because that's absolutely true, Ashley. And we've been pitted in so many different ways that just us being isn't good enough. Thanks, Dee. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you good. It all works. It all fits in. I was thinking as Ashley was speaking about how women and girls, specifically in the church, are taught that they're reduced to being an occasion to sin. The fact that your dress was too tight when you were leading praise and worship, so that's tempting. So you are the cause of the downfall. You're an occasion to sin. But it also makes me think about how really the foundation of Christianity did not separate sexuality from our personhood. The thought that was prevalent at the time that Christianity was being canonized, the 66 books were being brought together, was this idea of asceticism, or this idea that in order to be closer to God, I have to separate from my body. So in order to be close to divinity and to have a relationship, I can't enjoy the pleasures of life. Like, don't worry so much about the taste of your food. Don't worry so much about pleasure in any way, because you need to deny the flesh, right, to get closer to God. Mm-hmm. That idea is not Christian, right? Jesus didn't talk about that in the red letters. That was the philosophy that was prevalent at the time when Christianity was kind of being formulated and spread. And so pre-Christian Hebrew religion and life had sexuality, and it was a part of being a whole person, right? But when we brought the 66 books together, we kind of gathered up, just like when we're writing a book today, we bring in various cultural references. That's kind of what happened. And that's why we have that separation, and we're still trying to filter through that mess.
And so y'all bring up a really good point about, and I was going to go here too, about how the church has not only contributed to the shame of Black women, has perpetuated it and capitalized on it, and is the epitome of shame. Like, for instance, when the young girl gets pregnant by the pastor, they demonize her but protect the pastor. If you wear something that, if your dress is too short, you have to wear something that covers up your knee, because the pastor might look. He's a man, he's gonna look. So you have to cover up. But then what Dee brought into perspective, and how this is historical. All this bullshit is historical. And how white supremacy and white patriarchy and heteronormativity have, kind of guided society in this way, and has marginalized us in the process. So so let's hear more about, the Black church, white supremacy, and how that has contributed to these messages that Black women receive, that they aren't, woman enough, or your femininity is tied to your lack of sexuality, and you being more pious.
Well, in order to conquer, or in order to conquer a group of people, I have to other you. I have to make you feel as though you're less than this made up standard. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I will find a way to bring a lot of our issues back to the myth and delusion of white supremacy. It's this delusion that this ideal is supreme or higher than what everybody else in the whole entire world is doing. And so the way that you have sex, the way that you relate, I have to make it seem as though that is wrong. I have to other it in order to make myself feel supreme. And so because I have access to more weapons, I can force you into this.
And their weapon is their whiteness, and what's white is right.
Absolutely. That's it.
I think too, you have to take into account when you're looking at that, white women and white feminism, and how it objectified and hypersexualizes Black women's bodies, and Black feminism. And I think that that's a lot of what we have to deal with in therapy when women come in, because they've been given these mixed messages. One message from society, right, which like you said, Dr. Lex, is all of us, but there's another message that you're getting from your body and from who you are. And these messages don't go together. There's no, they're not congruent, right? And so you come into therapy dealing with your sex and your sexuality, and you're not enjoying sex because you've been viewed and you've been taught that you're kind of just an object for sex, right? You're an object for a man's pleasure, right? But that does not necessarily mean that you're supposed to derive any pleasure from this act yourself. If you do derive pleasure from this act, then deriving too much pleasure means that there's something wrong with you, right? And being able to communicate, like, I don't like this, I like this, right? Well, how do you know what you like? Because you weren't supposed to be doing anything with anybody, not even yourself. So can we kind of speak to that? And I know, Dr. Lex, you have your puppet, so we can...
I'll be ready. Look, I stay with my puppet. I love my, because 1, they are beautiful. 2, they are non-binary. And 3, people with vulvas don't see vulvas enough, right? How many of us been taught that our vulvas are ugly? That they're dirty, they're nasty. I've counseled a woman who was using bleach wipes on her vulva to make sure it didn't smell like fish and had burns. Burns, right? That's frightening. I've encountered women who call their clitoris a third nipple because nobody taught them the terminology of what this little thing does. So what you were saying is exactly why I love hotels so much, right? So Antoinette's song, and this is why I love WAP, and this is why I love all of this music that people have been like, I can't believe Black women are up there gyrating. Yeah, we've been gyrating since the beginning of time. It's just people tend to like it when they put an African skirt around it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the same exact move in some jean shorts. Okay? Same thing. And it is cultural. It's natural. It's the way body moves to movement. But for Black women to exclaim when I'm on top, I'm going to say my own name. Like, I own this. I own my body. From the ideas that we've been raised, and I know people are shifting and changing, but we've always told our littles, you came out of me. I own you until you get out this house, and you own me. Right? We didn't teach them bodily autonomy. Like, that's a new concept for Black kids. And I'm from the South, so I was definitely seen and not heard. You give your TT a kiss, you give your grandmama a kiss, but I don't like her whiskers. Or you kiss your grandma because that's respectful. Right? So if we are taught to betray our bodies, you eat all that food on your plate because little kids are starving in Africa. Right? We are taught to betray our bodies from early on. And I remember, because I was a Baptist at one time, I told you I'm recovering. Right? Every time I masturbated, I would pray for forgiveness because God forgives. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity. All you have to do is ask for forgiveness and you have it.
But Dr. Lex, and that's another thing, because I was in this one group, I think it was Black Therapists Rock, that shit show. And somebody posted that they actually discussed masturbation with their client. And you'd be surprised the number of black women that said, you did what? And how they thought that masturbation was the biggest sin in the world.
Child, you about to grow hair on your palms, right? Your vag is gonna fly. It's gonna fall off. It's gonna fall off. You gonna die. You done cursed all your grandbabies and the rest of your generational, yes. And meanwhile, walking around wondering why it feel like Mr. using the bathroom on you when you're having sex, or why you're watching yourself. You're watching yourself go through this sexual act, wondering what else you need to do for the rest of the day as soon as this is done. Right? That's what's going on.
But a big part of this too is because our bodies we have been conditioned to believe that our bodies are not ours. In every area and facet of life, from the church, your body belongs to God until you get a husband, or it's your father, you are your father's property until you get a husband. Medically, our bodies were seen as pleasure or experimentation. We are either sexual objects or we get experimented on. Medically, our bodies were experimented on because we couldn't feel pain like white women. So when it came to the field of gynecology, they experimented on us because we need to see how to make this surgery work or test this medicine out on this Black body because they're different, they're othered, they don't feel pain. And then even getting into just sexuality itself, the field of sex therapy and sex and anything involving sex stems back again to white men. The parts are named after them. Things, literally the G-spot is named after a white male gynecologist, I believe. And then you have like Masters and Johnson. These were white people learning about sex, but it only pertained to white people. Like we were not seen as sexual beings in our own. So a big part of it, especially talking about white supremacy and patriarchy and all that, is as Black women, our bodies have never belonged to us. They've either belonged to everybody else for pleasure, they belong to God until we meet a husband, or they belong to science for experimentation, but they do not belong to us. So if it doesn't belong to us, how do we don't know how to take it back. When it's given back to us, we don't know what to do with it. We haven't learned enough about it. A lot of our moms and grandmothers didn't teach us about our body. Forget sex. They didn't even teach us about the basics of our bodies, like the basics. Now, that's not my story. My mother and my aunts and my family have no issue talking about sex, the body, any of that. I was told what things were. But in a lot of cases, we're not. So you can't even begin to think about sex if you don't even know your body.
Can y'all put in the chat what you had to call your vulva and your vagina growing up? What did y'all call it? I'm just interested. I want to know. I'm from the South, so it was a pocketbook, and you had to keep your pocketbook closed and off the floor. I was like, okay, I guess. I don't know why it's gonna be on the floor, right? And then when I got older, it was vagina, but that's not even like what we're talking about. We're talking about a vulva, right? Mm-hmm. It's completely different. So I just want to know, like, around the world, like, what were y'all taught to call your genitals? Privates, coochie. Mm-hmm. A pity pat. That's a good one. I've never heard the pity pat. A flower. Yep. So look at all these names.
Deflowered, you know.
Right. Pocketbook and private parts. You from the South too, Carmen. So yeah. so many different words. Exactly, Ashley. Our bodies haven't been our own. So, and not only, like, we were taught about sexuality. I tell parents this as part of my shame-free sex ed. You're teaching about sexuality all the time because we learn nobody's supposed to touch you, right? Other than mom, dad, doctor, whoever, grandma. And we learned that you're supposed to keep it clean. So they were teaching us about sexuality. They didn't want to term it that, but that's what it is. Yes, you got to keep your privates clean so you can stay healthy, right? So you're not walking around like stank booty and stuff, and like your butt don't itch. That's all part of sexuality parts. Absolutely.
Right, but but you also teach with the things that you don't say, right? So you were taught how to stay clean, but you can liken that back to cleanliness is godliness.
Which is not in the Bible. That is
right,
in the Bible.
Right. But so you were taught those things, but other things were not said. You weren't taught, right? So in earlier conversation, we were talking about, like, you need to go to high school. Like, if you know how to please yourself, if you know what things make you feel good, then that can make the experience that much better for your partner, because you're more comfortable because you know you're gonna get to the mountaintop, right? But when you're expecting someone else to know how to get you to the mountaintop, when you don't know how to get you to the mountaintop, and they've never had a conversation with you about what gets you there, right. And you've never been taught that it's okay to have that specific conversation, because by not having that conversation, we've taught you that you can't have that conversation, right? That's another hurdle that women, then specifically Black women, have to conquer when it comes to sex and their sexuality. And I'm saying specifically Black women because white women, we see it all the time, like in television shows and movies and things. They're given a voice. They're allowed to say what things feel good to them, right? But when you watch,
then we say that's white folk shit,
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I was reading a book, and I had to close it because I'm very much into Black psychology and Africanism. But when it got to the section about, and I always go specifically to their sections that deal with sexuality to see what they're saying. And that's specifically what they were saying. They were saying that Black people didn't perform oral sex in Africa. Like all of these things were things that white people invented. And I'm like, nah, that ain't true. I know many Africans and right, and the things that they talk about. So, but white people are given that voice. White women can say that. Oh, they can say, oh, I want him to do this. Even as far back as Ally McBeal, which was in the 90s, when she was talking about oral sex and him going down on her, she was talking about that with a white woman, right? They only had one Black character on the show. And she was objectified with sex because they used her to trick the white man to pull down his pants. But okay, but she never had those type of sexual experiences, right? She never talked about what things made her feel good. So Black women have never been given that. Even in our movies, when there's a sex scene with a Black woman, right, and it's a movie that's produced by us, it's to lead to the pleasure of that Black man, right? One of our favorites that gets played on BET almost every Sunday with The Color Purple is Baby Boy, right? And then, right, I see your face, Dr. Lex, but in that movie, right, Taraji is there to please him. His mother is there to please the other guy. It was never about them and the things that they enjoyed. So when you talk about that, how does that come out in therapy when you're dealing with your clients?
And to piggyback off that, you know, how do you also disrupt those messages? You know, and then teach other Black people empowering messages about their bodies and how to talk to others about their bodies.
One thing I think about specifically is, I don't want to say taking orgasm off the table, but kind of dethroning orgasm and really focusing specifically on pleasure. Because a lot of times people will, you know, they'll come, well, I'm not having an orgasm. And like, okay, if that's something that you want to experience, we'll work through that. But let's focus on pleasure. And a lot of times they're just so focused on getting to the mountaintop or this idea of what it looks like to be finished because of what I see in porn, what I've heard from my friends, et cetera, where they're skipping past all of the delicious bits along the way. And so really helping folks to focus on pleasure, helping folks to understand what feels good, and the orgasm will come. You know, and if it doesn't, we'll get there too. But like just focusing on what feels good and not just sexual pleasure. A lot of times people aren't giving themselves space to experience pleasure in other ways. We're so focused on diet culture, right? So I got to eat this rice cake and this bland piece of chicken and this broccoli, but baby, you can season it good. You know, just trying to figure out different ways to experience pleasure in a lot of other areas as well.
I'm sorry. To piggyback off of that, I think we can literally take everything back to either the church or white supremacy. To piggyback off of people ignoring pleasure and just wanting to get to this mountaintop. Well, for so long, especially if you grew up in the church, what did you learn? Sex is for procreation. So if the goal of sex is procreation, pleasure is not even mentioned, although people don't read Song of Solomon, I guess, because that's all about pleasure.
Listen, the end of chapter 4, beginning of chapter 5, it'll teach you some things now.
in my the little booklet when I got married, you know, thing you pass out at the wedding. Look, I had a verse from Song of Solomon in there because I'm like, this is the book about pleasure and love and all those things that we skip over because sex is just for procreation and it should not be done outside of marriage and all these things that we are taught. If you are taught that for years and years, pleasure becomes the last thing on your mind because sex has a purpose. The purpose is to procreate. If that's the purpose, all this other stuff doesn't matter. So you don't talk about pleasure because that's not the point of sex. That's what you learn. So then when it comes to, oh, this is supposed to be enjoyable, now you don't know what is supposed to be enjoyable about it, what you enjoy, how to please that other person, or you're so worried about pleasing that other person because that's what you're taught. Your job as a woman is to please your husband. You're not worried about you. Like, okay, I have to please him. So if I'm not pleased, or I don't know what being pleased is, so that doesn't matter. So you're taught all these things that go totally against what we need as full sexual beings.
And to add to both Deandrea and Ashley, right? So one, people also assume you're heterosexual, right? So who said I have a vulva and I want to sleep with a penis? Ew, I don't. I'm good. Or maybe I want to explore and see what all of the different genitals, right? There are tons of different types of genitals. It's actually more than just 2 that exist in the world. And then the orgasm. So everybody thinks it's this lifetime, throw in your head, push over cliff. type feeling, right? That's only one type of orgasm. There are 13 different types of orgasms that the body can have. And there are different type of orgasmic level folks. Some folks, this just feels really nice and then it stops feeling really nice. And that's their orgasmic feeling. Some people do feel that pushed over the edge and a lot of people don't. Not to mention, most people with vulvas do not come from soul penetration alone. There has to be some type of clitoral stimulation. So all of those things, right? And not knowing and being taught and being gifted the idea to explore and be curious. Let me feel what feels good to my body. Do I like my body in this way, or do I want to shape it different, or how do I want it to be? Do I want to explore what this love feels like for another person of the same gender, of the same sex? Who am I really attracted to when I'm not put in this box of how I'm supposed to be for A, survivability, to survive being in my family, to survive being in my church, to survive being in this job, whatever it is. And then B, actually just for pleasure. What does it mean to solely be for my pleasure and not a tool of everybody else's pleasure? Because we're taught that self-sacrifice equals goodness. And that's a whole damn lie. Your self-sacrifice does not equal goodness. It don't make you a better mama. It don't make you a better daughter. It don't make you a better lover. It don't make you a better congregant. It don't make you a better worker. It makes you bitter and resentful.
Well, you have to save yourself for that man that's out there. You know, you got to save. You got to make sure that you're ready. You know, that he that findeth the wife findeth a good thing, or that virtuous woman, that Proverbs woman. You know. And you have this image that, you know, people have placed upon you. You got to come to church with your nice little hat and your long dress and get ready for that man that's going to come find you. How dare you have any urges? You know, because if you make this one mistake, that's going to push, you know, those vibes are going to go out and push this man that God meant for you away from you. You know, that all that bullshit.
I remember being told about the concept of dirty tennis shoes. And I know that there are a lot of different variations of this that are taught. But it was the idea that, you know, when I go buy a new pair of tennis shoes, I don't want any scuff marks on it. I don't want any gum on it. And that's how it is when you get married. When that man comes to find you, he wants a brand new pair of tennis shoes. He doesn't want the dirty pair of tennis shoes. And I'm sitting there as an older teenager like, ooh, this don't make sense. because honestly, I'm thinking about not only people who have just been normal teenagers and explored pleasure with themselves or with other partners, right? But also people who have been violated and the idea of soul ties, right? So, and that was a question that I had. So you're telling me that when I have sex with someone that my soul becomes tied with them, but what about people who have experienced rape? Oh, well, then God makes sure that there's no soul tie. That don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And so, but yeah, I know that dirty tennis shoes is one. But like I said, I know there are a lot of different variations of this that are taught and perpetuated that just don't make sense.
Right. And I think too, like we have to look at the definition of words, right? So like virtuous, that means you're having a high level of moral standard. That don't mean that you didn't have sex. That means that you picked and chose who you had sex with. You weren't just having sex with any random person.
But the church has conditioned us to associate morality with purity,
right?
And being a virgin.
But then looking at what is purity, right? Because black, the color black is pure. Pure means that there's no other substance, right? So you could be a pure hoe, which means you purely have sex with whoever you want to, right? And yeah. that's so again, we have to look at the definition of words, and I think that in this permeates our entire society, in every society. I feel comfortable in saying that is we get very pedestrian understandings and definitions of things, and we limit ourselves to those. Right? And anybody that challenges that, then we find that is wrong, right? And I think that even speaks to when Shanti posted what she posted about her sex education being, don't get pregnant, don't get AIDS. This is what a condom looks like. And this is what an IUD looks like, right? Like, because that's the box that we said the sex education is. But what we're talking about right now is actual sex education, because you need to know how your body works,
Exactly.
right? Because if I want to prevent you from getting pregnant, if I tell you how your body actually works, then you'll know the things that you need to do to not get pregnant. You'll know the things that you need to do to not get an STI, right? But when I don't do that and I'm using fear as a motivator, one of the things that I tell my clients in therapy, fear always leads you in the wrong direction. And they make this face like, what's she talking about? And I'm like, okay, have you ever watched the movie with the white chick and she gets scared and she starts running? What happens?
You run to the wrong direction.
Exactly. Because when you're doing something out of fear, you're not thinking about what you're doing, right? You're in survival mode and I just want to survive. I just want to survive. But if you take a step back and you don't allow your fear to motivate you and you get educated and you make an educated decision, you won't go that direction. But we use fear as a motivator to do things so often. And specifically when we're talking to girls, to women. And when we got our panelists together, I said, the reason I wanted this conversation was part of the Jasmine Sullivan album, but really I have dealt with so many female clients that have come in and they're dealing with issues. And Dr. Bonner and I talked about this, and they were dealing with issues with sex, with their partners, and not being able to have those conversations, right? Coming to me and saying, I don't like when my partner does this, but I don't know how to have that conversation with him. Or I had one client that sent her entire family chat a text message letting them know that her boyfriend couldn't please her sexually, right? And she was asking them for help, right? But that's because we don't have these conversations. We're not educating folks, right?
And I see that, Dr. Nick. So like, again, people come to me for sex things a lot. And what I loved about the album, because that I forget whose tale it is, honestly, but talks about sex being commodified, right? So she says, even when you lay down with your husband, you know that he's going to get you that new bag, that new shoes, those new houses, because you're having sex with him. And so sex becomes transactional. And that's another thing. And I told y'all earlier, my mama said, if you're going to be a hoe, be a $5,000 hoe. Don't be a $5 hoe. Know your worth, right? And as long as you have a vagina, you'll never be homeless. Because sex is something that we know sells, and sex is something that can be capitalized on. And our sex workers do amazing work.
Yes.
Right? The fact that they bring in pleasure for folks, and they are paid, and they need to be paid adequately and have health care and benefits for their time. Because I don't know how something is criminalized that it's free to do. It's only y'all mad because y'all can't tax it? Like that's what it is? Y'all just mad that y'all can't tax it? Because I can go out here and sleep with whoever I want to, however many times I want to, however many people I want to at one time. And it's not illegal as long as everybody is a consenting adult. But as soon as I ask about for a little bit of cash for what I'm about to do, now it's illegal.
See, that goes to the narrative of, I don't have ownership of my own body. I don't have the right to give it to whoever I want, and the right to request compensation for my time. The government still has, ownership of your body and what you do with it.
Exactly. And that policing enters into marital bedrooms, it enters into loverships, because now it's this idea that I own your body. And this is when people come to me, because I'm like, that's marital rape. Right? No, just because you're married, this person does not own your body or access to your body. I also see sexual manipulation as withholding sex. That is still using power in a sexual way to manipulate another person. Well, you didn't take out the trash, so you don't get to have any. Well, you didn't do this, so I'm not sleeping with you. And until you do whatever you sleep on the couch. That is sexual manipulation. That is still using your sexual power over somebody to get them to acquiesce to what you want them to do. So sex comes with power, and we have to figure out where that power dynamic is and how to, again, center your pleasure. You doing this because you mad, sis, or because you just don't want to have sex? Like, those are different things. But you do want to have sex with him, but he didn't take out the trash. Or you do want to have sex with her, but she ain't make up the bed. So now you out and hot and bothered and can't sleep and having super sexy fantasy dreams and humping pillows because you're trying to get a point across because they didn't make up a bed? For real? That's what we doing?
So stupid. Right. And that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about. I'm like, that's stupid. So.
But let's unpack that though. I mean, could it be a way of them taking back the power of their own body too, though?
I mean,
it's a misuse of power though, and it's because they don't know how to take power back the correct way. That's not, manipulation is not a way to take back power. That's a way.
Love it.
That's a way to make yourself upset. You gonna end up mad in the end too because now you're not getting none. So what power is that?
Right.
You're not getting what you want, and this is manipulative. So that's no real power because when you have a power, you can get what you want with that power.
Right.
In a correct way.
Right. And so what I tell my clients is, one, you need to be able to have a conversation about the trash. Like, if the trash is the issue, deal with the trash issue. But and this is one of those times in therapy when I use myself as an example. Me personally, we're adults. I can fuck you and be mad at you. Right. Right. Those two separate brains. Right. If I need that, I need that. Now, that thing that I'm mad at you about, once we put our clothes back on, I'm going to say, I'm mad at you about A, B, and C, and let's deal with that, right? So be able to separate that. Like, we compartmentalize other things, but we can't compartmentalize that, then that's something else that we have to deal with, right?
So that's perfect, Dr. Nick, because what Ashley said earlier about communication. So couples come to me about communication issues, and I'm like, y'all don't have a communication issue. You understand exactly what they just said. They said they don't like your ass today. That's what they said. You heard it, and you just didn't like it. You have an intimacy issue.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between being honest and being truthful. So people will tell you the truth all day and all night, but they won't tell you that I'm being honest. So it's not like, I was mad at you that you didn't take out the trash. When you didn't take out the trash, I felt disrespected because I really honor keeping a clean house, and I worked really hard today. I was so exhausted that I just needed a little bit of help, and I felt abandoned in that moment. That's honesty. That's intimacy. That's vulnerability. But we conflate that with weakness. And Black folks aren't always given the permission to feel all the feels.
Yes.
Right? I can show you I'm angry. I can show you I don't want to talk to you. I can show you I'm okay. And if you're a Black male, I can't be too happy because then I'm gay. Right? And if I'm a Black female, I can't be too down because then everybody's going to wonder what's wrong with me. So we all trying to be Shonda Rhimes characters, right? You sitting up there traumatized in the kitchen, drinking wine and eating popcorn and crying until somebody come knock on the door and you put back on your super cape to go back in the world to go solve all the problems. Meanwhile, you got PTSD, right? That's not what that is. So that, I don't think communication is ever really the issue. I'm like, y'all cute. Let's keep going. Oh, it's because you don't feel safe with your lover around the comments that they made about your body 3 years ago. And now you're trying to suck in your stomach while you're trying to ride dick.
Right.
Let's talk about that. Right? So it's that vulnerability piece that is actually end up missing. And being taught to recognize this is what this feeling in your gut says. This is how you show it to other people because you're afraid of that rejection and abandonment.
I also want to remind the audience, no, I'm sorry, Dee, to remind the audience, you can put your comments in the discussion in the chat, and feel free to unmute yourself and say stuff to the panelists. Like, that's why we're doing this. Y'all are getting Black excellence for free, so I suggest that you take advantage of it now. But go ahead, Dee, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I was reminded as Dr. Lex was talking, I have gained so much freedom in my own journey when I gave myself permission to be sad. And I think that I just really sparkled to what she was saying, how a lot of times we don't, specifically Black women, don't give ourselves space for that. And I've had a lot of situations where I've lost people really close to me. I was widowed in 2016 and my best friend passed away last year. And so with that, learning that it's okay to be sad, following, but paying attention to people's uncomfortability with my sadness has been very interesting, where I have to say, I'm sad, it's okay. I don't need anything. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna cry and I'm gonna look at the wall and I'm gonna be okay. I'm safe. I'm gonna be okay, but give me space to feel sad. And a lot of times people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to hold that. And sometimes I don't even need you to hold it for me. Just let me be.
And see, again, you know, that's reclaiming that ownership of your emotions, your body. That is taken from you. So I love that. I love that.
And I was going to say, like, with that, that's one of the things that I've been dealing with my clients with, is being able to give yourself grace. Specifically, Black women, give yourself some grace. You give grace to everybody else. We extend grace to everybody else. We excuse everything that everybody else does, but you're very hard on yourself, right? So extend some of that grace that you give to other people to yourself, and allow yourself to be and feel whatever you're feeling. I've told my clients that will come in and they're sad. Now we make sure that it's not depression. You're not about to get but if you're really feeling sad, it's okay to feel that way, and to feel that way as long as you need to, right? Live in that, be in that. Like, it's part of who you are, and you feel it for a reason. We can explore where that's coming from, but it's okay to feel that way. Like, I think that we as Black people don't give ourselves enough opportunity to feel things. We're in this society where we want to heal quickly. We want to move on to the next thing. I think that, and this is going off of our topic. I'm going to bring it back to our topic. But I think that even dealing with like the Black Lives Matters and stuff, like, we need to be angry, and we need to stay angry for a while. We don't need to heal from this, right? Because that's what we have done, right? Historically, is something happens, we do a march, we do a whatever, we heal, we come back together, and then 5, 10, 15 years or so, it happens again, right? And the same thing now, bringing it back to our topic, the same thing happens in relationship, right? So you all have this issue and you talk about it, right? And all of a sudden, we're good. We've healed, we've dealt with it, and we're moving on. Well, you haven't, because what happens is something else that's totally insignificant becomes the triggering event, right, for your trauma. But your trauma has nothing to do with that triggering event. And that's one of the things that I explain to people about trauma. Trauma has nothing to do with the triggering event. Nothing to do with that. It's the feelings that you have, right? And those feelings are because you didn't really deal with what it was back then, right? So if he's not doing things to please you sexually, if he's not honoring you all's intimacy, right? And I'm using he because that's kind of right. But if your partner is not doing those things, you're dealing with that trauma. Now, that person not taking out the trash, or that person walking in and you didn't like the way they walked today, right, isn't really what it's about. It's really about those other things that you haven't dealt with because you didn't give yourself an opportunity to live in those feelings and to explore those feelings, like Dee was saying. Like, I'm sad and I'm going to be sad.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something that you said, Dr. Nick. All of my clients can tell you the two things that I always say to them, and they say it back to me all the time. You can sit with that feeling. You do not have to get away from it or run from it. You need to sit with that feeling. And I always end every session and say, remember to show yourself compassion this week or for the next 2 weeks, however long, because we struggle in that area. We have a problem, like you said, just sitting with the uncomfortable feelings or the harder feelings. And something that one of my Black female clients pointed out to me, she said, well, being sad and being angry is not productive. I said, who told you had to always be productive? You know, you don't have to always be productive. It's not about that. If you are processing feelings and it's something you need to sit with, I don't expect you to produce anything. Well,
that is being productive though.
And that's still being productive.
Right.
But she means it in a different way. Like, what is that? What is that doing? That's not doing anything. That's not helping anything. I said, but it is productive to you, to your emotional intelligence, to your well-being, and taking that back into the realm of the discussion in couples If you can't sit with this person that you claim that you care about and you love and you have given yourself to physically, if you can't sit in a space with that person that's uncomfortable, that's a problem. You're not going to always be happy in a relationship. Sex is not going to always be great, but you can't sit in that space, and you also can't talk about it. I said that to a couple before. So y'all can have sex, but y'all can't talk about it? That makes no sense. You have it, but I'm asking you questions about it and you getting flustered. Why is that? Where is that coming from?
That's the shame.
Why the shame? Why the shame around this discussion? Well, because talking about it, I said, talking about it is what? You actively do it. So talk about it. There can't be shame around something that you do that now you can't talk about. Because now we get into the issue of what's the underlying problem. Because like we said, it's not the trash. It's not this other stuff. It's something deeper than that. It's something more vulnerable that you're not willing to share. And that's another thing that always seems to come up with couples. You can do this very intimate, very personal act. You can have sex with this person, but you cannot be vulnerable with them. You can't tell them, I feel hurt. I feel pain. I feel disrespected. You have a problem saying that to them, but you don't have a problem laying with them. This makes no sense in the grand scheme of things, but it all goes back to shame. There is the act itself, which we are taught different things about. It's for procreation, it's for this, it's for that. But nobody really talks about the act in any of these areas. When we take sex education in school, we're learning like the basics. We're not learning pleasure. We're learning how to wear a pad, how to put on a condom. Sex creates babies. These are the STDs. We're learning all that in sex education if you take the class at school. But we're not learning, well, what do women like? What do men like? What's pleasurable? Where's the male G-spot? Like, they don't tell us that in those classes. We don't learn that. That's something that we have to get from outside sources and people that don't really ever know what they're talking about. You learning from your homegirl who really didn't learn herself and she found it on TV. It's just like, where is the actual sex education, the real sex education that makes it comfortable for this to be a discussion that we can have openly?
It's with the prostitutes. But we have some questions. So one question is, how do you navigate as a sex counselor when you have experienced trauma yourself?
So I was waiting on this question from a future sex educator and sex counselor coming in all the way from Belgium. What's going to be really important, one, is to stay on top of your healing, right? So you will work into your narrative that you are a survivor of trauma, right? And that is going to equip you with the ability to empathize, because you will know exactly that helplessness, that feeling of dirtiness, even those questionable feelings of pleasure that pop up in trauma when you're like, I'm not supposed to be feeling this. What is this? I don't want this. How come this feels good? Because the body actually is just reacting to its natural responses.
Yes.
You will have direct insight into those pieces that other folks won't have. Go ahead, Dr. Nate.
I was gonna say there's another question, but
so just really quickly, once you're able to integrate that narrative, you'll find as a counselor, and I'm sure all the counselors in here have it, you end up with a split self. So there's going to be your counselor side that's going to be right in the front, that's going to be talking to people, and there's going to be that back side of you that's like, ooh, I felt that in my belly. Note to self, talk to my supervisor about that a little bit later. And what is this kid going through right now? So you're going to make them so much the center and the focus. And it's okay. It's a very white form of therapy to be doing the whole blank slate bullshit. You are a whole human who have access to a whole range of emotions. You don't get to see your blank face like, and how did that feel? And then what happened? Ain't nobody doing that. Don't nobody do that.
No, never.
And I know you're European, so like y'all emotions might be a little bit less reckless than us Americans, but we a little bit reckless over here, okay? So show up how you're going to show up, because studies actually say the rapport with the client are actually what is most helpful to helping them heal, not the modality that you use.
Yeah, and it's
thank you so much.
Specifically with Black clients too, because as a people, we do not play about transparency and trust. So if I feel that you are not being authentic or real, I'm not going to open up to you. So for me, I'm very open with my clients. And it is something that I had to get into it with my supervisor about, not only my professor at school, but my site supervisor, because they have this issue with self-disclosure and being too open with their clients. And I'm like, okay, this is a white framework. I understand that, but that is not how this operates for me. That's not how it can operate for me, because especially with my Black clients, if I'm up there just, and how did you feel about that? That's not going to work. That's not. My clients literally relate when I can tell a story that resonates with them.
Yes.
Narrative is a big thing with us.
Yes. So calling us therapy too.
Exactly. So don't allow the structure and the foundation of the therapeutic world and counseling. That foundation is based, like I said earlier, I think before we started, I said that is based for white middle-class men. It was made by white middle-class men. That has nothing to do with us. We can't use those same methods. So my clients have to know that I'm real, or they will not open up to me. So yes, please be vulnerable. The blank slate thing is BS. Don't do that.
Right. And the only thing that I'll add to that, and then I'm going to answer the question is, what I tell my supervisees is you do what you have to do in class. When you come in here, what makes you a great clinician is you. People can smell it when you're not being you. And while we're talking about us, that actually works with them as well, right? That's why so many of them seek us out, is because they want a rapport, they want a relationship with the person. Because as Dr. Lex said, it's the therapeutic relationship that is how the process works. It doesn't matter what modality you're using, right? If the person doesn't trust you, they're not going to open up to you. Another question we have is, how do we change the narrative within our families, especially with adult women, when it comes to the sexuality?
Fight them. Lay hand. No, I'm just playing.
but you bring up a good point though. We have to disrupt all of those messages. We have to fight those messages because they're so ingrained. Like you said, we're society. We perpetuate that bullshit. So we have to challenge ourselves to reorient our thinking, and then fight others that perpetuate that motive.
So exactly what Dr. Ford just said. So I have two littles, and mine are 2 and 4, and we in a pandemic now. They can't go to school. Okay, so we've been home. But that being said, my 4-year-old literally just came out to me as a girl. So literally just said, "Mom, I think I'm a girl today." Which has been one of my goals. It was such a proud parenting moment because we didn't gender her, right? So we let her pick, and she went by a big kid for a long time. And I have a grandmother who's still living, and my partner's mother, who is African from Ghana, specifically of the Akan tribe, and is 70 plus as well. And both of them learned not to call my Garnet a girl, right? Because I would interrupt and say, "Garnet doesn't go by girl, Garnet goes by big kid." And Garnet would correct them. And when we talk about bodies, I would say we don't talk about bodies that way in our family, right? It makes them really uncomfortable, and they might actually not want to engage with you because it makes them uncomfortable. And so reminding them over and over again, right? Especially about bodily autonomy. I'm like, Garnet said no. So Garnet meant no. Put them down. They do not like that. Right? And you have a teen, so letting that teen and be empowered and permission of when great grandma does that, that's not okay. You can say it, and then I will always back you up. Period.com. We got to let go. And look, my degrees are new. I still will throw hands. Please don't let this pretty fool you. I ain't been pretty my whole life. I will, come on. So all of that to be said, you do need to interrupt, right? And say actually, we don't talk about vulvas. And I use that language. So my kids know vulva, they know anus, they know penis. The people are going to call us from the school system. I already know, it's fine. But they use those words, and we use them without shame. We use them unabashedly. So if you have a teenager, and be like, yes, I gave my teenager condoms because I want my teenager to be prepared if anything ever pops off. If they ever make that decision, I want them to feel safe, empowered, and not dependent on another person for their own health and safety. No parent I have ever met says, I want my kid to have a shitty sex life when they grow up. No parent. I've yet to meet that parent that says, I want my kid to have a shitty sex life. They might say, I don't want my kid to have a sex life. Okay, not real feasible, but sure. And I always ask them, do you want your kid to learn from wisdom, or do you want them to learn from pain? You choose. Because they can learn from the pain that you had and gain some wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to learn the same painful ways that you did. Right? And your grandmama and great grandmama and aunts, they got their stories where they learned from some pain. Is that what you want to teach your niece? You want your niece to learn that way? No? Why not? So this is how we teach them differently.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Dr. Lex said. You have to be willing to deal with the backlash you don't get, because you'll get it, because everybody is not on that progressive journey. Everybody is not in the same place. We're not all on the same path. So transgenerational issues are a thing. Your grandparents and your parents might not understand where you are right now. And like my daughter is just turned 13. What she is hearing and learning and all the stuff, she totally different from me, but I'm also very open and honest with her. And for some people, not the people in my family, see, this is also a question that doesn't resonate for me, because like I said, my family had no issue talking about sex. To this day, I have friends who are shocked to hear that I had a sex toy party with my mom and my aunts and my cousins. Like, it was all of us, and that was not a problem. So, yeah, you have to be willing to deal with that backlash, because you're going to get it, just simply because people don't understand it. It's different. It bucks the system and the tradition that they've always known, that this is not something we talk about. You shouldn't be telling them the correct names for body parts. And it's like, why not? That's the actual correct name. It's better than all these other things that you call it. So you have to be willing to also face that and stand in front of those nieces and nephews and daughters and sons when they say things that are not making those other generations comfortable. You have to be willing to stand in front of that and say, well, look, this is what they are taught. This is what they know. This is what we're doing different. You have to be willing to do that, and sometimes feel uncomfortable yourself, because everybody's not going to be happy with you. Nobody is ever happy with the progressive person. That's just all to it. They're not going to be happy with the person that's being progressive and trying to make those what they consider major changes. So you have to be willing to withstand that. And it might not change everybody. Your grandmother may not ever change, and that's okay. But then you change that dynamic yourself. Like, okay, you don't have to change, but this is an area that we either won't discuss or I won't be coming around. Like, you have to be willing to take that step back from certain people too.
Yeah, and I think that with the change you're teaching people. So Dee hasn't been saying stuff, but she's been preaching in the chat. So if y'all been paying attention to that, she's been giving y'all a good word. But sometimes, but we teach people how to engage us, how to interact with us, right? And sometimes we have to reteach people, right? So what the things that we allow, teach people that, okay, I can do that. The things that we don't allow, teaches people, like we all had that auntie, that uncle. I have all white furniture, and I got 10 nieces and nephews, and they always come to my house. And even when they were little people, they never touched my furniture. And I never said, don't touch my furniture. No, I cannot take you. And I never said, don't touch my furniture. They just knew from the beginning. And one of them, my brother's oldest son, was tempted to do it. And my sister's son said to him, don't do that. Uncle Junior don't play. Don't touch his furniture. Don't touch it. Right? But I never said anything to them about don't touch my furniture. They knew from the way that I carried myself and the things that I did do. Right? I'd already taught them how you interact and how you engage with me. Like Dr. Lex said, she taught her family, these are the things that we say. These are the things that we don't say, right? And so even when because they're older and they slip, like Ashley said, you have people that sometimes you catch yourself slipping. She probably don't even say anything. She just look at them. She give them that look and they pull it together, right? They know, oh, okay, wait, that's right. That's right, this is Dr. Lex. So you have to do that. You have to teach people. And if it's something that you don't want to do or engage in, or something that you don't want people to say, then you don't respond. You don't interact with them, and they'll learn. Okay, well, I can't say that to her because she's gonna shut down, right? But you have to teach people. That's how we change the narrative. Is we have to teach people, like, this is what it is for me, right? And that's what we do in therapy, right? In therapy, what we're doing is teaching people. That's really what it is we're teaching people a new way of thinking, looking, and doing things, right? We're not, it's not anything magical, mystical. We're not Mr. Miyagi. None of that stuff is going on. We're just an outside person that doesn't have a dog in the fight with a different perspective that asks you questions to get you to look at things differently, right? So we're teaching you new behaviors, right? One of the things that I deal with a lot of Black men in therapy, and they adopt my language, right? They come in not talking about feelings, but by session 3, they're telling you know, when that happened, I felt like this, right? I saw you, Jasmine Sullivan. But they start talking about feelings because I'm teaching them different. So I'll take what they said and I say, "Ooh, if that happened to me, that's how I would feel," and then they feel comfortable doing that. I'm about to text you. I'm responding to you, Dr. Ford. But that's what we have to do when we're talking about disrupting the narrative and changing things, is we have to teach people how we want them to interact with us.
All right, everybody. This has been.
I think we have a raised hand. I'm not
Kimberly
sure.
has a raised
I didn't want to
Yeah,
ignore it.
Kimberly.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you guys?
How are
I just
you?
had a couple I've been on today. I don't even know how I ended up on the call. I saw the Clinicians of Color. I'm an LCSW from Mississippi. So I have several comments. I was a teen mom at the age of 15. I've been raised in a Baptist church. I just have a couple comments, so I'll be as quick as possible. First, I would agree with your last comment, Dr. Nick, as far as teaching people how to treat us. And that's a standard that we have. They can tell that from our energy. They can tell that from our standard. We teach people how to treat us. And as far as the comment someone had regarding aunts and uncles and family members and a teen, my daughter is now 25. Having those conversations, sometimes with family members, it just comes from ignorance. It comes from taught and learned behaviors throughout the family. And sometimes it's not about being disrespectful, it's about the unknown. And sometimes that's all they know. So a lot of that is about having open rapport and allowing them the opportunity to ask questions. And at that time, we provide education. And sometimes they're just scared about the unknown, so they really just go with the flow of what everybody else says or what everybody else does. But if we just teach them and just allow them to ask our questions on a light, airy energy, sometimes it's all about just them not truly understanding where we are and how we learn and what the new norm is that we're creating for the children and just sex in general. I also want to talk about, I know earlier, there were a lot of comments about, ancestry and slavery and white men. But now I just want to say this comment. A lot of times when we see those negative, evil energies and hatred stemming from the actions of white males, in that background, those are those white females, their spouses that saw our bodies, that were jealous of our bodies, so that pushed that. And so our family and our ancestors taught us protection. They taught us how to hide, so we're not sought out by those evil aunts and evil wives and evil white ladies. Not everybody white lady evil, but so that was still, so they telling their husbands, they telling their uncles and their brothers, get her, she want it. So now we know a lot of men, honey, they don't think for themselves, they go off what they are told and whispered in their ears. So now we point at white men for their actions, but as we see still today, those white women whispered and pushed that behavior and thought pattern. And so that created that evil energy. And so that created those white women being over the households and being that shame that we were taught. And that has come down as a way to break the minds of African Americans in that as well. So anyway, next topic. I also wanted to talk about being raised in the South. When we talked about Christianity, I was waiting for it to come up, so I'll bring it up. I remember at the age of 14, I had only been 15 a month when I had my daughter. And I'm still married to her father. We've been married 22 years coming in December. I love him. It had nothing to do about an arranged marriage, none of that. I was just fine and he was just an athlete. That's just what it is. But let me say this. I remember.
Yes, girl, you better get your fine ass athlete, child.
That's what I'm saying.
Find me one too. Maybe he has a brother.
You know what? A lot of my friends are physicians. So I got you, Dr. Ford. I have you all together. You want an eye doctor or a cardiologist? Because I got you.
Girl, both.
Okay. I'm so for real.
The eye doctor. They're going to be at home. The eye doctor.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm so for real about that. Okay, but let me say this. I remember being 14 and after telling my family that I was pregnant, I was like the shame person of the family. I was a black sheep at that moment because nobody in my family supposedly had a child out of wedlock. Again, I live in Mississippi. Now I'm gonna get back to that, Mr. Nick, because I had to do the calculation on my grandmother who had 13 children. My father was number 11 and his dad passed when he was 1. But his younger brothers are 5 years younger than him. So who they daddy is, because they daddy was my daddy, her granddaddy died. But anyway, they say I was disrespectful when I did the math. But anyway, that's not the point. I remember before I gave birth, they told me I had to go before the church and ask the church for forgiveness because I was pregnant. And in my heart, I really didn't know why. I mean, I understood the formality of it, but I just did it to make my parents happy, and everybody boo-hooed and cried and did their whole ritual thing, and I was just sort of chilling. I had 2 good friends at the church. We were all the same age. They're the ones that should have been pregnant. But anyway, so they was boohoo crying and confessing. I was just the one that got caught up, but that's okay. So, going through that, and also I could just remember, as far as church, women not being allowed to wear pants. That's new. And so how it was all sexualized as far as women wearing pants or wearing, skirts only or dresses only. So I think that's all my comments, but I've enjoyed it so far, but I just wanted to point those out. Thank you.
Thank you. And and to address the white women being complicit in that, who's to say white women also didn't use black women sexually?
Indeed.
And who breastfed the white women's kids?
Indeed. I was trying to keep it short.
So you preach the sermon, child. I love it. I love it. Usually we try to have this at an hour, but this is going for an hour and a half, and it's been really good. So what may have to happen is we have to do a part 2 for this, because I know that there's so much more we can unpack. There's been so many really good, as we say, nuggets that have been dropped. Did our hearts not burn with the word? Look, Dr. Lex, I'm still a Baptist. I'm the minister of music and the choir director, so I'm still there. So
come on, musician. What instrument?
Piano.
Oh, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Bless the Lord.
Bless the Lord. Mm-hmm. So I don't think our panel for today and all the knowledge that they brought. You all brought it. This is Black excellence. Yes, free Black excellence. So want to thank Dr. Nick for putting this together. And I see we have Dr. Bonner and with us from NABC, and future Dr. Farabee with us from NABC. Thank you all so much for providing us this platform. We got to do this again. Because all this beautiful Black women energy is captivating. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
So in closing, we have these discussions every month now. It's not every month about sex, but every month we're having discussions. I posted the May flyer. Next month, we're talking in honor of Mother's Day. We're having a conversation with Black mothers and mothers of Black children. And I'm actually going to moderate that one. I was thinking, I was like, who's the moderator for that? That's me. So if you are available next month, I believe it's the 18th, but don't quote me. I'm not very good with the dates. It's on the flyer of May at 1 o'clock. We'll be talking about that. I want to thank my panelists. They do this for free, you all. So what you all are getting for free, you would typically have to pay for. And I didn't know Dr. Lex or Deandrea from a can of paint. I posted and asked. Deandrea I think she was the first one, and then she hit me to Dr. Lex, right? And they both agreed they didn't even think about it. It was like not even hesitation, right? Then Ashley reached out to me, and I was like, of course, Ashley, because we were in a discussion group. But see, what y'all don't know is, one, I don't bring no mess. Whenever we do this, I research my people. So I started Googling you all. I started following Ashley on Facebook and reading her posts. To know who I'm bringing, because we have to be good consumers, right? And what we ingest, right? And that can be what we're going to the grocery store getting, what we read, what we watch, and who's educating us, right? So I want to make sure that anybody that I bring to my people knows what they're talking about. And so we don't bring no mess, right? I've put their information in the chat for you to follow them on social media. We will be posting this to YouTube, and they will have the links. I'm going to post a link to my page as well, so that you all can watch the video. They have books. Buy their books, follow them, support them. NABC has our own conferences and things that come up. Do not be surprised if you see them as a lecturer and that you have to pay when you see them, because they're going to be doing their own thing by themselves. They're not going to be on a discussion panel. But as you've seen here, that it's worth it. This is quality, right? And the other folks have plenty of people speaking to them. I was in a discussion group, and they posted a flyer that had sex therapists, and it was not anybody on that flyer that looked like us. And we have our own, right? So we need to start valuing what we have of our own and appreciating that and supporting that. So again, in closing, I thank Dr. Bonner. I thank future Dr. Furby. I'm speaking into existence, future Dr. Ashley Fennell and future Dr. D. We talked about that. I see it, right? And I'm gonna tell you, everybody that I have said this about, I have not had one person that I've said this about that has not gotten back to me and said, oh my gosh, I'm in school, I'm getting another degree. You spoke that into existence, right? So I'm speaking that into this existence, right? Because we need this. We need our own, right? Again, I'm not gonna hold you all anymore. Thank you all so much. Thank you to my speakers. I wish that I had like some Amazon gift cards or something, because y'all were bringing a word today. We should pass the collection plate for this.
Yeah.
But please follow them on social media. Go to Amazon and buy Dr. Lex's book, right? Support our own. Thank you all again. Have a great Sunday. Bye.